Commissioners, you're ready. Good afternoon, Island Council members and members of the Central Committee, Vito Charles and Saskia Matthew, Island Registrar, Ms. Akila Levinstone, Island Governor and Chairman of the Island Council, Jonathan Johnson, members of the Executive Council, Commissioner Everton Heiliger and Commissioner Verzegers, Island Secretary, Bram Streppel, civil servants, and to the general public, whether present here today or viewing via live stream. Welcome to the Central Committee meeting of Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. Before going into the agenda points, allow me to mention the absence of Island Council members Rolando Wilson and Julio Every, who are both absent with notice. Today we have 7 points on the agenda. Point 1 was the opening of the meeting, and we will now move on to agenda point 2, which is approval of the agenda. I now look to the council members' approval. We now move on to the next agenda point, which is approval of the minutes from the Public Central Committee meeting on August 27, 2024 and September 17, 2024. I now look to the council members' approval. We now move on to agenda point number 4, citizens' right to speak on agenda points with prior announcement. I was informed that no requests by inhabitants have been received. We can therefore move on to agenda point number 5. Agenda point number 5 is question round concerning flag questions from incoming correspondence list from August 21st to September 10th, 2024. This is in accordance with Article 18 of the Rules of Procedure of the Island Council meeting. There was nothing flagged in the last Central Committee meeting. In the last Island Council meeting. We will therefore proceed to the next agenda point, which is Island Council Proposal 2024.6 Draft Multi-Annual Budget 2025 to 2028. Commissioner Zegers, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and good afternoon to everyone present here today and following via social media. This afternoon, I would like to formally present to you the draft budget for the years 2025 until 2028. This is the second time that this agenda point has been discussed in the Central Committee. As in our previous meeting, there were already some questions posed about the draft budget. So although the formal presentation is happening this week, there has already been some discussions about the draft budget. The draft budget has been made in accordance to the guidelines prescribed by the Decree of Budgets and Accountability, BES, also known as the BBV-BES. This draft budget has also been reviewed by the CFD and has received a positive advice, but with some remarks for improvements which I will detail in a bit. Assuming the draft budget is adopted by the Island Council this week, the public entity will be able to meet the official submission deadline. The draft multi-annual budget goes into great detail explaining the many facets of the government organization, its plans and the services that it provides. Each year, the financial team, as well as the various individual departments, make great strides in improving the quality of the information that is provided in the budget document. Based on requests for a more detailed Island Council proposal by the Council, more in-depth information is now also provided in this document, which we do believe is an improvement for the reader. Obviously, there is still room for improvement. This can be seen in the advice of the CFD. And while we take their recommendations seriously, we also see where certain requests do not fall within what is required by the FinBES. While providing this additional information isn't an issue, it does mean more manual administration for the financial team. The challenge remains with the current financial software that is being used. We hope that in the coming months, various planned improvements will be realized in the financial system, which will reduce the amount of manual work currently being done by the financial team. There is also a technical visit planned next month to Curacao, where members of the financial team will discuss with the CFD several of the concerns that were raised during the course of this year. For the last few years, the tone of the budget presentation has changed significantly. This is mainly because of the increases in the free allowance, which has allowed for more flexibility, more possibilities to build a stronger, more resilient organization, and more room to balance the budget, which is something that was almost impossible to do only a few years ago. The growth of the free allowance has definitely been a welcome improvement, albeit one that took many years to realize and unfortunately still isn't at the level that it needs to be. Over the years, Verza has been given the task to analyze what public entities need in order to execute their legal obligations. However, in their most recent scope, what wasn't included is what public entities need for future growth, for investments, and for structural maintenance. There is an ongoing study which is being conducted by a group called AEF, who will now make an analysis of what is needed to fill this gap. Whether or not the anticipated results will be realized is yet to be seen, as this will be determined by the coalition government in the Netherlands. The draft budget for 2025 totals $47.3 million. This is an increase of over $1.8 million in comparison to 2024. Since last year, the CFT, in their controlling role, has requested that all special purpose grants be added to the budget so that there is a realistic picture and a better overview of all the planned financial activities for the budgetary year. Not only does this have an impact on the total budget, but it is also reflected in the quarterly reports that are presented throughout each budget year. For this draft budget, $22.7 million represents special purpose grants, while $23.1 million is free allowance. And although not all special purpose grants can be seen as all structural, there still remains a gap in ensuring that there are always sufficient structural means to finance structural costs. As for the liquidity position, we continue to see improvements from year to year. In the management letter from our auditors, Ernst & Young, it is noted that the amount of current available cash, excluding earmarked funds received from the Netherlands, is currently sufficient to pay the current liabilities and has again improved in comparison to the prior year. The long-term available cash has also increased, mainly due to the increase in the free allowance and the decrease in long-term debt. In order to maintain this trend, it is advised to continue with conservative budgeting and spending. This is also something that continues to be recommended by the auditor. As the public entity organization continues to grow and professionalize, along with the growing budget, more is expected of the organization by both the Island Council and the national government. For many years, while operating with a skeletal budget, several departments were either mostly understaffed, and if persons were brought in, these salaries were mostly covered by special purpose grants. In the Island Council proposal, it can be seen that a priority has been given to addressing the capacity challenges, as several essential positions have been either created or there has been a shift where salaries that were being covered by special purpose grants are now going to be covered by the structural budget. This is essential for continuity in the organization. Other than the adjustments made with regards to salaries and the proposed increases for subsidies to various organizations, there aren't any significant policy changes to this draft budget. With salaries being by far the biggest overall expenditure, the remainder of the budget is mostly allocated towards the general operating costs of the government departments, government infrastructure, and the services which are provided to the island. One of the bigger expenses is maintenance in both the infrastructure and in government buildings and properties. It is a goal to make a more comprehensive planning for how this will be managed moving forward. The new study about what is needed for maintenance and investments will be useful in creating such structural plans. The general breakdown of how this draft budget has been allocated is as follows. $10.3 million for the general administration, $22.2 million for traffic, transport, and water management, $155,000 for education, $3.4 million for social services and social work, $256,000 for spatial planning and public housing, $818,000 for public order and safety, $1.6 million for economic categories, $1.6 million for culture and recreation, $6.3 million for public health, and $443,000 for financing and general funds. It is important to note that these categories are a combination of various departments and initiatives, which include salary expenditures and special purpose grant projects, which are funded by the Netherlands. As for the income, only $1.5 million is generated from local levies, 23.1 million comes from the free allowance, 20.5 million from special purpose grants, and 2.2 million from reserve funds. As for the planned investments for 2025, these are financed through the depreciation budgets. In the draft budget, 200,000 has been proposed for the ICT, general software and hardware, 225,000 for vehicle purchases, and 50,000 for furniture. In general, it is fair to say that much is being done, and the draft budget for 2025 to 2028 is a good representation of this. Obviously, there is still much that can still be improved, and this will take time, but we have come a very long way, especially during the last few years. The public entity has been able to continue improving its level of financial management and its financial position. Wages for civil servants have improved significantly as the organization was able to transition to using the RCN scales while adhering to the social minimum requirements. We have also worked towards improving the quality of government services while being able to secure additional funding to realize several important projects, with the biggest one being the Harbour project, which was signed only a few weeks ago. And while we see these improvements, it is important to note that more attention is still needed for the government organization as a whole, for policy creation and execution, for poverty alleviation measures, for enforcement, for digitalization, connectivity, economic development, and sustainability. However, if we look back to where we have come from, it is undeniable that as a public entity, we have made great strides over the years, even though it has not always been at the pace that we would have wanted to see it. To conclude, it is safe to say that the majority of the improvements and the gains that a public entity and the island has achieved is greatly influenced by our strong financial management and the trust that has been built over the years between the government of Saba and the Netherlands. These two factors are sometimes seen by many as overrated, but I can assure you that it has played an instrumental role. As Commissioner of Finance, I would like to take this opportunity to give a special thank you to Maureen and her financial team, who work tirelessly to ensure that Saba's financial management is maintained at such a high level. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. We will now go into the question round pertaining to the draft multi-annual budget 2025 to 2028. Island Council Member Vito Charles, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. First, let me also join the Commissioner in expressing sincere thanks to the appreciation to the Finance Department for the hard work that they've done, and congratulate them once again for their hard work in making sure that the budget is delivered on time, delivered within budget, most importantly, and it fits within the requirements of the law. I think, as the Commission mentioned, it's no easy feat, and it speaks to one of the reasons why I say when we look at certain things done, our relationship with the Netherlands, how important it is to maintain, a good working relationship. We see changing governments all the time in the Netherlands, and that has an impact on how we move forward as an island. And we can only hope that the work, our track record speaks for itself and continues to ensure that we can work with them to get things done for the people of this island. My first question is in regards to the ferry pilot. For the last couple of years, the canal has run between the islands. I think you can agree it's a very important lifeline for the island. It creates connectivity between Saba Station and St. Martin at a lower price. And it's definitely something we championed in the past. However, I see in the budget that the pilot is extended for an additional 2 years for $1 million. But it's stated that only $700,000 of this will be spent. So I'm just curious how will the remaining funds be spent an additional $300,000? There is not, there's no explanation for what's happening to that in the budget. Any questions?
Commissioner Zegers, do you prefer that you answer the question per question given, or is it fine if you continue?
It's fine.
Okay, you can continue. Charles.
The second question is in relation to the maintenance of capital goods, in particular roads. And it's mentioned that the entire road network will be mapped in 2024 and to determine the condition of the roads. I think this is a good idea because people have remarked to me we've always been known for stellar quality of our roads, and you can imagine just regular traffic and just wear and tear takes its toll, and that needs to be addressed. So I'm curious whether or not this mapping has already taken place, because they stated that a model will be developed, and I'm curious if this model has already been developed, and if it has or soon will be available, and it will be available to us for reviewing. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, some of the road network is already in a state of disrepair, and I'm just curious if there's already planning and funding for repairs to be executed on these parts, which you can already see having less than stellar quality. Those are the two questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Charles. Commissioner Zegers, you can now respond.
Thank you for the questions. Just maybe a bit of the history with regards to the ferry pilot, just for context. When the pilot first started, there was $2 million available for 2 years, and when that period was over, it transitioned into another pilot for 2 years, but only $1 million was made available. So the $700,000 that you mentioned that's into the budget. That's $700,000 for the first year. The idea behind that, and that was during the negotiations that were held, I believe it was last year in November here on Saba between the operator Saba and Stacia, is that they felt the operator felt confident enough that if they could build a service that it could become stronger during the first year of the second pilot, that they would need more of the subsidy during the first year than what they would need in the second year. So actually $700,000 would be for the subsidy for 2024 and $300,000 then again for 2025, assuming that during the course of this year they would be able to make it a more sustainable, self-sustainable service. There has been ongoing discussions with the operator. There still isn't a PSO, even though that has been discussed already from last year in November. We do hope that those discussions can be concluded soon, but that's how that budget is now being divided. So that was agreed upon with the operator, $700,000 this year, and then $300,000 next year.
Yes.
You said quite some things there in that statement, and what I'm curious about is so you said that the operator says that they can become profitable, more or less, that they believe that they can have sufficient passengers to make it economically viable for them to continue operating. But I think in terms of ferry service, there's other conditions that need to be met, and one of them is cost. And if we look, I'll look at one island, and if we look at the cost of ferry transportation between those islands and the mainland, it's significantly lower than what the Macan is charging passengers to go between Saba and Stacia. And that begs the question then, what do we think should be the cost of inter-island transportation? And how do we see that being addressed in the future? Because if we're only, profitability is the only concern, then I think, and of course there should be connectivity, but I think there should be connectivity and it should be at a lower price. And that's, to stimulate economic development, but also to foster the ties between the islands. And when we talk, of course, in the Netherlands, they will tell you that the ferry operators, they don't get any subsidy, which is untrue because they have to dredge every year to the cost of 9 million euros for all of the islands. And actually the cost is going up annually because of climate change, it's increasing the amount of silt and so on in the area, so the cost just continues to increase. And I'm like, well, they are maintaining a price for residents. I think one of the gentlemen told me last time that his wife was able to travel for a whole year for less than 400 euros. And I don't think that either you take the ferry or you take a plane, that you can travel for 2 times or 3 times for $400. So I'm just curious, what is the ultimate goal with establishing and maintaining the ferry service?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point, and it's something that we still have to continue to lobby for. And during the discussions, everyone acknowledges the fact that connectivity is important. They see it as vital for economic development, vital for the movement of people and goods. But yeah, the bigger concern is how does that get funded? Obviously, the operators up in the Canada, even the cargo boats, they're not going to do it for a loss. That is why you see the price of shipping, excessively high. I do agree that the price of connectivity in general, not just cargo, but also for people, should be considerably low. That's something that's policy related. That's something that we still have to try to achieve. A stronger PSO with better funding, more long-term structural funding from the Netherlands. So while I fully agree, and I think everyone that sits at the table does also agree that we should strive for lower prices, it's still very much dependent on the amount of subsidy that we receive. And if you look at the comparison of the 2 pilot periods, initially we had a pilot of 2 years where 2 million was received, whereas in the second stage, for 2 extra years, only 1 million was received, whereas we saw that, the business model didn't grow to what it needed to be to ensure that it could be self-sustainable and also still be, offer affordable rates. And that's also one of the reasons why there currently isn't a signed agreement with the operator on the islands, because of the need to increase the rates to cover some of the costs that were unforeseen originally, just to help to cover the difference of that additional million that's not included into the second subsidy. So that continues to be an ongoing discussion with the Netherlands, that connectivity is important if we want to see further economic development.
In addition to just the concerns about connectivity, I'm also concerned with the standards that we established for the operator of the service. Because I was talking to somebody who traveled recently, and then they were telling me that it was hot, the air condition wasn't working, and so on. And again, when you travel on these services, I invite you to do the same when you go to the Netherlands. Take the opportunity to go to the water island and use the ferry service there and see what it is in comparison to what we experience there. There you have a very large ship with there's a restaurant on board, or not restaurant, but catering on board. You get coffee, you get all these amenities, and you almost feel like you're in the lap of luxury. And then here we have, I can call it less than stellar product. And I don't want to just make it seem like I'm grateful, but we have to elevate the standard, I think, and that's what we should be doing. Not saying that it has to be like you're traveling on a luxury yacht, but I do think that people deserve to travel between the islands in some level of comfort. And it should be at a very decent and affordable price for families who want to take their children on vacation, for people who want to do business. There's so many opportunities there, and I think we're losing out on it because of the cost.
I agree.
Thank you, and then Councilmember Charles. Island Council member. Or
Yeah,
still
those-
on?
No additional questions, there's a second question.
You can continue.
There was questions about the road network. The condition of the roads is already known, but not well digitally documented. Currently, repairs and maintenance of the road network take place on an ad hoc basis. This means that areas are being identified which need urgent improvements, after which these works are prepared and executed. This way of working can be improved by making a multi-annual maintenance planning. To create a multi-annual maintenance planning, it's important to get an overview of the entire road network and its condition. The public entity is currently setting up a Geographic Information System, GIS, for Saba. There are many types and uses of the GIS system, but in this case, it is a map showing all infrastructure on Saba. Layers of information are added to this map, for example, areas in which the road needs to be widened, areas prone to erosion, or the locations of potholes. This creates an information-rich overview which will help to plan maintenance, repairs, and investments in infrastructure. The public entity is currently developing this GIS system, but is experiencing some technical challenges. The GIS system requires a base map. All other information is added as layers to this base map. The base map is an accurate and up-to-date topographic map of the location. Unfortunately, no base map is currently available for Saba. The first step is to create this base map and have the Saba coordinate system translated to international GIS coordinates. This is currently in progress. Once a base map is created, layers of information will be added to this map, such as the conditions of the roads, and the first version of the GIS system is expected to be ready by the first quarter of 2025, and adding layers of information to this system will be a continuous process. As for the road network and the planned repairs, in the 2025 draft budget, it does include $650,000 for maintenance of roads and retaining walls. Areas of the road network have been identified which need urgent improvements. Some of these areas will be improved during the course of 2024, such as some safety walls and potholes, while other projects are scheduled to start in 2025.
Island Councilmember Charles, do you have any follow-up questions?
So I'm just curious what you mentioned, repairs and so on. But I noticed something, and that's what my concerns about the state of this repair, because we've done a lot of infrastructure work, putting things on the ground, gratings and so on, and then you see that slowly begins some level of deterioration because joints don't meet, and then that further causes some erosion, and then it's really doesn't look as neat as it did before. And then you mentioned potholes and so on. I'm just curious, at one point, is there plans to resurface sections of the road? Because I can imagine, I think, maybe in certain parts, they're well past 30-40 year mark. I can remember some areas definitely when I was a young boy, those areas were being done. And then other areas more recently. So I'm just wondering if there's a plan to completely resurface portions of the road as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's right now anything in the planning to completely resurface all the roads. I think that's a huge project, but I will use a very specific area on the island where will be just more than fixing a pothole. For example, the corner below, right here, below Lollipops, there's several sections of the road where there's potholes, and the luxury of having concrete roads is that you can remove sections of the road and then just pave it back, whereas that's a bit more difficult to do if we had asphalt roads, for example. So where we do see that there's areas where there's excessive potholes or excessive cracking, there are plans to have those sections removed and then repaved, because for the most part I think we can all agree that Saba does probably have one of the better road networks, surface-wise, in the Caribbean region. People come here and brag about the quality of the roads in comparison to other Caribbean islands. And obviously there's always room to make the road infrastructure better. And step by step we're improving the the foundations of the roads, trying to make them wider, and also this process to fix potholes. So that's an ongoing process.
And because I see, for instance, on Bonaire and the station, there's a specific amount allocated to the road network from the national government, and I'm just curious if we intend to look at a plan such as like those islands to address our, because I think if you start seeing what we're seeing now, in 5-10 years, it's going to become worse. And so I'm just wondering if there are plans, maybe not right now, not in the next year or two, but at least for the future, to request funding to address the condition of the roads in a larger scale.
Well, there are some funds that's already allocated for road maintenance. That comes directly from the Netherlands, which is a restricted free allowance that must be used for infrastructure. So for roads, for walls, whatever have you. The reality is that Statia and Bonaire, their road network is, for lack of better words, not in a condition as ours. It's in many cases it's pretty bad. So of course that has a priority. That's seen as more of a priority to improve the infrastructure. Whereas on Saba, the road network is seen as a fairly decent condition. So I do think it's about priorities and where funds are being allocated to. For example, the harbor project. Saba has a greater need for a harbor, school facilities and things like that. So you see, I think it's more about where is the greater need is seen, but that doesn't take away the fact that our road network is also important. So that's something that, of course, that stays on the table for the ongoing discussions with the Netherlands.
Does that conclude your? Thank you, Madam Councilmember Charles. Madam Councilmember Matthew, before you go with your question, do you have any follow-up questions pertaining to the Commissioner's responses? No? Okay, then you can proceed with your questions. Commissioner Zegers, would you like to proceed the same way for Ms. Matthews' questions?
Yeah, because many of the questions, not all the questions are for me. It's for multiple portfolios. So I think,
Then you can do it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to say again, I was very pleased with the budget, multi-annual budget. I was put together, very detailed, and especially the proposal. So I was very happy with that. Before I start with the question, I would just like to point out that on page 7, it was mentioned that the government program is a coalition of vision. And I think it should be reflected that this is the plan of the governing party. And the budget includes key objectives from the government program, Saba package, and the organizational development plan. Sorry. Organizational development is mentioned over 20 times in this document. We have an available structural budget and a solid plan and execution. And I'm curious to see this plan. Can I get a summary of it? And does the plan mention refer to the organizational plan? And if not, can you elaborate on the organizational development plan and grant? Is reassessing staff to align with organizational needs based on individual skills and performance to optimize efficiency and effectiveness also in the organizational plan? I've only seen this talk of reassessing staff under the Public Works post. What methods were used to gauge the organizational needs regarding staff and positions? How many positions do we need to fill to optimize efficiency and effectiveness at once? Certain roles have undergone adjustments to ensure proper alignment with established pay scales. Is this based on the CLA or the function book, or both? And what is the status of the project function house? Go to carnival subsidies. Commissioner, can I request a copy of the financial reports for Carnival 2023 and 2024? And I see in the budget the carnival subsidies have increased to address the rising costs. I'm just wondering what these costs are that this refers to. Because I've never been on the committee, but from outside looking in, most carnival nights are promoter nights, and promoters have to pay for use of the field, food, drinks, entertainment. So what exactly are these costs that we're talking about? What are the costs that the committee actually has? And if the costs are in regards to the sound system, then my question, and I think the question of the community, is usually why don't we invest in our own, but also what happens to the equipment that we already have. Let's see, but this budget, I realized that starting next year it will no longer be subsidized, it will fall within the culture department's budget. And then I was just wondering, like right now we have a budget of 50,000, and I was just wondering, like, what do we usually spend this money on besides entertainment? And then why do we charge a fee for the booths? Where does that money go? With regards to the liquidity position, I read on page 9 that the auditors are cautious about the budget's sustainability, the capability to properly establish a multi-annual budget, and the organizational requirements to perform all tasks. Can you please explain this? Then we have the project bureau, which is mentioned a few times in this document. One refers to the project and policy bureau, and then again is mentioned under community development. Under community development, the project bureau says this post says the goal of the subsidy for the project bureau is to provide support and assistance to community organizations, strengthening their administrative records, and aiding in external funding applications. Someone who is managing this subsidy, earlier this year, or late last year, I don't remember, I asked about the project bureau being represented twice on the budget. So maybe just to finally get the answer, or to make it clear, what exactly is the difference between policy and project bureau, and is referenced as project bureau in the budget, and then the project bureau that falls under the community development. I remember the answer I got before was there was something established before the dismantling of members' activities, and that the government was looking for someone to manage it. So maybe I can get a breakdown of what is really going on with this project bureau. Under the finance course, I saw that the finance department is working on the debt collection policy, and I'm just wondering what the difference was between the collections policy and the debt collection policy. By HRM, it speaks about the risk inventory evaluation reports. So just wondering what that looks like, and if the Executive Council will ensure that the Integrity Initiative and the Correct Prudence continue with the change of the HRM department head. Under ICT, it's stated that several previously budgeted positions have been transferred to the CIO office. I'm wondering what these positions were, and does the ICT actually need staff? And then when I look at the CIO office, so that's the Chief Information Officer, most definitions of CIO and the descriptions in the basic proposal means that the CIO is the head of the ICT department. So then I wonder, why doesn't the CIO and the CISO fall under the ICT department? And what was the actual idea behind making ICT and CIO offices separate? And then, well, now they are separate offices or departments, then why were vacancies taken from ICT? Under facility management, there's a post for event management. I'm just wondering what events are referred to under event management. How many staff are available for this? And I guess it depends what is referred to under event management. Then my question would be, should event management be a task of the government? Infrastructural development and spatial planning. The department will continue to manage construction projects, including tenders, among other things. Do we have a tender policy? So I didn't notice it in the list of policies that we got. And if not, how can we guarantee that the tender procedures are executed fairly? For public works, under preventative maintenance, we touched on that a bit a while ago. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts with, right now we have all these projects and we have a lot of heavy equipment driving up and down the roads. And then that also causes damage to the roads, and the speed bumps we constantly have to replace, especially the ones down here where we used to be. On the topic of the ferry pilot, you just mentioned, Commissioner Zebas, that the PSO is not signed as yet, but I noticed that in Q4, evaluation will be done to determine if adjustments are needed to optimize the service and rates. I'm just wondering if any evaluations have been carried out before, and if not, why not? And of course, we have the question always, what about day trips to station?
Sorry, Saskia. If we can just adjourn for maybe 2 minutes, because the commissioner went to the bathroom to come back, and I don't want him to miss any questions, okay? That's fine? All right, so we're going to adjourn for 2 minutes and then continue. Good afternoon once again. We will now resume the meeting. Island Councilmember Matthew, you can now continue with your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under agriculture support goat control project, page 23, mentions purchase material for the goat control project. So just wondering what kind of material. And then it also talks about effective population management. So just wondering if you could explain that a bit. And when I got to I think it was community development, I'm not sure right now, or before community development post, education and culture was spoken about, and then it goes into community development. And right now, those two posts are under community development, but even in the budget, they are mentioned separately. And I'm wondering why education and culture isn't a standalone department from community development. I know that for education and culture, There's a lot of tasks. There's a lot of things coming up right now, researching how to create yeah, there's a lot of tasks right now in those two departments. And right now we have like 2 people, and I think it's a little bit too much for those persons. And then it goes back to me for the organizational plan, because I think in like researching how to create the organizational plan should have shown that education and culture would lack capacity, especially when we have to finalize a culture policy and create an educational vision. And then besides the culture policy, there are a lot of projects to be executed for culture. And when this policy is completed, the list will get even longer. For education, we recently talked about the student association that's being established, or that's already established. But things like come up like researching subsidies for schools, maybe helping them apply, and maybe eventually tracking students' programs and progress, so that we could advocate for positions we need on the island and attract them back. And I think it would be good to have dedicated staff, especially in education, but also I think education and culture could go together. And then again, I have to ask, like, how are we gauging what we need in the organization? And how do we measure that one department needs more staff than another? And based on what are decisions we need to either add extra tasks to some departments or create new departments? And curious, under community development, at one point you mentioned the goal of the community development plan. So it discusses the goal of the community development plan, and then another part it discusses that the plan is being developed. So I'm just wondering what the status is of the community development policy plan. Under poverty alleviation, I see that we're talking about empowering the community members to regain financial independence and stability, to make some decisions that remain out of poverty. And I think that before we could even do that, we need to find out why they might be in this situation. And if you look at the cost of living, for some people it seems impossible to survive on the island and regain their financial independence. So what about enforcing that shop items have prices and all shop receipts are itemized, or having a one-time subsidy for the new fiber internet connections? And then I can see people making sound decisions and remaining out of poverty. And then I also wonder if the poverty alleviation policy is for the entire community or just for the clients of the community development. Under employment opportunity program, at what point are the participants in this program no longer far from the labor market? Does the program involve skills training? Are we paying attention to vacancies on the island that can be filled locally? And can you explain what the community job center should look like or would look like? On the public health, I'm curious to know in what way mental health is prioritized. On the public hygiene and vector control, talks about ensuring food safety. I wonder how exactly are these things executed? Does the staff have the authority and the support to execute this task? Are the proper procedures in place to enforce any discrepancies that may arise? And the income not related to the local levies, I see that the government crane rental was added to the government's income stream. Does this mean that money was never collected for renting the crane in Fox? Or if it was, then how much money has the crane generated so far? And what is the rate of the crane? And under that same post, income not related to local levies, there's a post that says just as rental. I'm just wondering what exactly that means, or what does that stand for? And lastly, under management on page 62, is the training and development program based on the government program, the Saba package, the organizational survey, or audit? Focus on high and soft skills. How is it structured? Is it an ongoing process? Is it for all employees? What happens if an employee refuses training? And can you tell me about the employer well-being program and the positive results it has yielded?
Thank you, Island Councilor Matthew. I will first go to Commissioner Zegers.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and also thank you for those questions. I will go through the list of questions and answer the ones that fall within my portfolios. There was a question initially about the governing program and the coalition ambition. This is something that needs to be corrected and will be in the final version of the budget, which will be on the agenda on Thursday. But that's something that indeed is incorrect, so as such it has to be corrected. There was also a question for me about a liquidity position. The auditor's concerns stem from the reliance on special purpose grants to fund certain structural expenses, such as salaries and maintenance. These grants are often one-off payments or need to be periodically renewed. The issue is that these expenses are reoccurring, and if the grants are not renewed, they could result in budgetary shortfall in future years. This creates uncertainty in terms of sustainability, as a multi-annual budget depends on external funding sources that are not guaranteed. Ensuring that critical expenses have reliable long-term funding is essential to maintain budgetary stability and avoid deficits. That's also why into the proposal you see that many of the salaries that have been covered initially by incidental funds have now been covered by the structural budget. That ensures continuity and reduces that risk a bit. What is the difference between the collection policy and the debt collections? Essentially is the same thing. It's just that a word was left out during the drafting of the text. As for the tender policy, the public entity currently does not have a formal tender policy and is not bound to Dutch or European tender regulations. However, the general principles of good governance do apply and are observed. These include the principles of due diligence, confidence, legal certainty, equality. In general, the following procedures is being followed. For smaller projects, 2 or 3 quotations are requested from contractors that have the expertise and equipment needed for the work and are available within the time frame of the project. The public entity aims at giving all local contractors a fair chance. In case of a very small repair or urgent project, or projects requiring very specific expertise, sometimes only 1 quotation is requested, but this is very limited. For larger projects, a public tender is published and all interested contractors are invited to submit a bid. Very large projects are tendered internationally, as was the case with the harbour. For the implementation of a tender policy, the public entity receives questions about its tender procedures throughout the time. To provide more clarity on this, we are currently developing a clear and transparent tender policy for all construction projects with the following goals. That is clarity on tender procedures, all local contractors get a fair chance, all departments apply the same tender policy, accountability, and that of course leads to more accountability for the use of public funds. The Island Council will be involved in this process of establishing the tender policy before the end of this year. With regards to preventative maintenance and the heavy equipment onto the roads and replacing the speed bumps, replacing speed bumps is costly. For sure they're not cheap, but the reality is that the slopes make it rather difficult to transport heavy equipment by trailers because that can become very dangerous. So that's something that we have to monitor. We have to make a better plan of how we can maybe get better quality speed bumps or limit the amount of times that the heavy equipment is being transported onto the public roads. But the reality is that for certain jobs you need bigger equipment, and it's hard to really make a planning that all of it's done all at once. But that's something that does have our attention because, as Councilmember Charles mentioned about the roads and the quality, it's not just the speed bumps which get damaged, but it also has significant wear and tear, especially with its joinings. because, there's, concrete doesn't necessarily join. There's always a cold jointing. So that's something that for sure has a bigger impact onto the quality of our road network. There was a question about the ferry pilot and the PSO. The new PSO has not been signed as yet. In July, during a steering committee meeting with Stacia and the operator, it was agreed that a financial deep dive would be conducted before the final agreement was signed. This deep dive was requested by Stacia because of the proposed increase into the rate for Stacia. This deep dive is in the final stage pending some additional documentation, after which a steering committee meeting will be held to discuss the results and the next steps, including the signing of the PSO. There was a small evaluation of the service which was held in year one of the service, and a second more extensive evaluation which was held last year in November here on Saba. No evaluation has occurred yet this year due to the delayed signing of the PSO. And of course the day trips to Stacia is an ongoing discussion with the operator to see how that can be fitted into the schedule, but that's difficult without having an agreement with them, because for the course of 2024 they have been operating without a contract to provide services for Saba Station. As for the agricultural support and goat control project, materials for the goat control project include materials for the butcher station, food safety materials, butchering equipment, etc., ammunition and signage for goat hunting, and materials for capture and care for free-roaming livestock that is captured in inhabited areas. Effective population management, in this case of the invasive species, involves the removal of roaming livestock. This is done by ensuring a removal rate that exceeds reproduction rate, as well as ensuring that remaining animals are kept in closed areas. As for the poverty alleviation policy and transparency for pricing, a decree on price labeling has been drafted and would allow a legal basis for the enforcement of price labeling. The finalization of both the decree and the enforcement strategy is currently in progress. Upon completion, a meeting will be organized with the relevant stakeholders to inform them of the decree's provisions, as well as a grace period allotted for the implementation of proper price labeling. Once this process is completed, the decree will then be sent to the Executive Council for formal adoption and approval. There's also something related to this, and it's something that has been discussed in the past, is the quick scan onto the cost drivers. That project has been ongoing for a few months already, but more a desk study. That group that's doing that study will be visiting in the coming weeks. I believe that is a meeting that's going to, if it hasn't been scheduled, it will be scheduled with the Island Council to get your feedback as well. While in the Netherlands, I did meet with a group, and yeah, it's quite alarming to see, at least just from the information that they already have without even visiting, what really is driving up the cost. It seems that, I think it's known that shipping is a major obstacle. Once that report is in the final stages, they will also bring recommendations of what they think can be done that would have an impact on the high cost of living. So that I think is something that we can also use as a tool during negotiations. As for the revenue from the crane, the crane that the old crane that the government had was not necessarily rented out. That was only used primarily to lift boats at the harbor, and the revenue generated from the old crane was included into the harbor revenues. However, the newer crane that was purchased a few years ago, that has more capabilities, it's more mobile, so you see it working on some of the bigger projects on the island. It was not limited to just usage at the harbor. When you have heavy equipment like that, you want it to be used rather than just sitting, gathering rust and the buildup of salt. So that does get rented, especially we see at Scout's Place at the hospital project. So that is why there has been a new post that is separated from the harbor revenue, seeing that it's not just harbor related. As for the exact amount generated and the rate, that's information that I don't have as yet, but can be provided. And as for the question about the post that just says rental, the other rental post refers to the rental of government-owned buildings, which is a separate ongoing income category unrelated to the crane. And I believe that answers the questions that fall within my portfolio areas.
Thank you, Commissioner Zegers. Item Councilwoman Banfi, do you have any follow-up questions for Commissioner Zegers at this time?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Zegers. Okay, so for the crane rental, where we get, was the old crane just for the boats, and we have a new crane on the different projects, and I actually forgot about the old crane. I was just referring to the new one. And I think my question would be then, since it's now added to the income stream, does that mean that we are going to now start collecting money, or we have been collecting money?
No, have been collecting. Yeah. And that information can be provided.
Okay. And then with the quick scan, I'm actually happy to hear that this is already ongoing, because we spoke about this for some time, so it's good to hear that that's happening. Happy to hear about the decree for the price labeling and enforcement being finalized, because that's a hot topic. About the tender policy, if you could just for clarity. So you mentioned based on the projects. So is it based on the projects you already know, not you, but the departments already know that which construction companies have which machinery or which the capabilities, and then it's based on that. So like for example, if it's 3 companies that have this type of machinery and could do this job, then they would have the opportunity to send in bids and then you make the choice.
That's how it's currently being done.
Okay.
But a more formal procedure is being worked on, and that's also something that has been flagged by the auditor before. So that's part of the homework that's necessary to ensure that there's more transparency in how it's being done. So that's a work in progress.
And then I think the last thing would be with the collection policy and the debt collection policy. Good to understand that it's the same thing. But then I have a question, because I think I remember hearing maybe a couple of months ago that the collections policy was already finished and already being used. So then I kind of confused if this didn't actually happen, if this is still being worked on, if maybe I understood or misunderstood, because I remember hearing that there was already a collections policy, or a collections policy was already being worked on, or had been worked on, or
there's a policy, and that's something that's ongoing with the implementation of it. So the finance department has met with many of the debtors to explain that there's still outstanding balances, and in many cases already there's payment plans. So it's an ongoing process, but there is a policy, and the finance department is quite busy with the collections. So we should see that as an area that has been improved. So.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zegers. Item Councilmember Charles, do you have any follow-up questions pertaining to these responses?
Yeah, I do have a couple questions in regards to the questions. First question is, because it's immediately a discussion, was the crane rental, and how is the cost for that created? So how do you determine what you're going to charge and so on? And maybe I'm wrong, but should any income that is generated by the public entity, or if there's a new cost post being decided on, should that be included in the retributive earning? And should ever to receive an ordinance, or we should ordinance, shouldn't that then come to the island council for amendment so that that can be confirmed, so to speak? And was, maybe because also you mentioned it was in the post for the harbor, maybe it was done previously, but I'm curious if it has been passed before, an amendment for the grade rental or any other adjustments for income have been brought to the island council previously, and shouldn't that be something that is done in the future? In regards to tenders, Councilmember asked how that procedure goes. But I remember at one point we had a discussion about social impact and making sure that bidders understood that they have an obligation to look at the social fabric of the island and make sure that there's some connection between the work that they're doing and the community. And I'm curious how that is being done. Well, let's say medium-sized projects, because I understand for a small job or a small contractor, it's much more difficult, but above a certain amount, that should be taken into consideration. And particularly as we move forward with this $40 million project, $8 million project, I'm just curious what social impact is being looked at in that particular project. And then there was also another discussion with training for employees and the employee wellness program. And I'm just curious, onboarding, because it's good, I think, to train workers regularly, but also when a new employees start working, how do we transmit to them what we think is important as an organization? You know, the hard skills shown on time, doing the work that is necessary, and so on. That's one thing. But also, I think within every organization, there's values. Or NPA both, we also establish values. And, you know, how are we explaining to them what is expected? How we explain to our personnel when they start what we, for instance, integrity. I'll give you an example. Recently I saw where Facebook fired some employees, and I think it's trivial, because they had misused $25 vouchers. And the reason for that was because they said that they were given for one purpose and the employees use them for another purpose. And it sparked in my mind a discussion about integrity. And how do we have discussions within our own organization about integrity? So I'm just wondering what we do here at public entity. And then the final point is about the poverty alleviation discussion, because I think it is important that we address costs. Costs are high and and we have to look for ways to reduce those costs. Of course, part of the problem is that we are reliant on food prices. I just happened to hear a supermarket owner speaking to someone the other day, and they were talking about almost everything that they bring into the supermarket comes from abroad, and we almost have very little control of the price. But also, because you mentioned that we need to do that before we do something else, I think we should do both. It's not either or, it should be we do this and we do that. Because, the Commissioner mentioned in his introductory remarks that salaries have gone up. And the question is, how we have a discussion and how we bring awareness to people about the decisions they make. And as a person, do I decide to not take a loan? Do I decide to not go on vacation? Do I decide, how do I allocate the scarce resources that I receive monthly to achieve what I want to achieve in my life? And that's something that needs to be to be done, I think, as an employer, but also as a public entity. We have an obligation to empower individuals in the community to make sound financial decisions. We saw that there's an empowerment workshop this weekend for the ladies. And I also hope that at one point it will also be extended to men and families in general. So that people in general, you know, it's not a one-time thing, but I think in general people need to be more aware of the financial decisions that they have to take. So I just wanted to mention that. Those are my points. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Item Councilman Charles. Commissioner Zegers, you can now respond.
Yeah, well, two of the questions, I believe, will be answered later. With regards to the whole poverty alleviation subject, you know, I do believe that knowledge is key though. And, you know, just raising salaries and not giving information about proper budgeting, you know, that should go hand in hand, and those are programs that we should look at doing. I remember during the discussions with the Ministry of SLA, you know, that was one of the focal points that they said they were going to, they wanted to implement. But again, that's something that I don't think has really materialized, and yeah, it's important to have a follow-up with that. With regards to the training, wellness programs, I believe that's something that probably gets answered when the governor addresses the questions with regards to the organization and the developments there. As for the crane rental and the retributive ordering, I believe you are right in that sense that, you know, that's something that should go to the Island Council. But I hope you allow me some time that I can get the background information there so that I can give you a full answer. As for the social impact with tenders, this is something that you've brought up in the past, and you know, it's something that I brought up during the later stages of the discussions with the harbor project. And yeah, a project of that scale is really hard to say, well, let's, you know, put, you know, X amount towards, you know, a social project on the island. You know, whereas the contractor quickly comes back and says, well, you know, we're going to employ as many local people as we can. You know, quite a bit of, you know, money stays on the island, whether it's rent, restaurants, supermarkets, you name it. People looking for donations. You know, so, you know, that is always something that comes back to the community. It's not just 100% either goes in concrete and the rest of it goes into, you know, to the company's pockets. But that's something that I believe needs to be further developed as to how we go about and do that. With the horror project, you know, right at the end there was still discussions, even though we received 40 million, that you know, we still have to make a few adjustments to the projects just so that we could please, not necessarily please, just that we can ensure that how there were sufficient contingencies in case something went wrong, because the number that was always presented was with very low contingencies, and from a ministry perspective, they always felt that how that was too low. So we had to, you know, ease them that, you know, if something went wrong, if there was a delay, if the hurricane caused damage, that you know, we wouldn't come knocking on doors again and say, hey, you know, well, we don't have sufficient money to complete the project. So to bring that part into the discussion to say, well, let's allocate a few $100,000 for social impact projects, you know, yeah, that's a difficult discussion to have when the funders of the project are saying, well, we have to ensure that the contingencies are at an acceptable level. But that's just an example, you know, where those discussions need to be better structured, and not just at the end phase, but yeah, maybe during the tender procedure. You know, when we're creating that policy, maybe that's a good moment to bring it in, that we can say, well, this is what we see as, you know, especially for the bigger contractors, how the bigger contractors for bigger projects can contribute, whether it's via employment or via rental or via, you know, the day-to-day spending on the island. But that's something that for sure we need to better develop.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Zegers. I now move on to Commissioner Hailiger, and we may now proceed with answering the questions addressed by Island Councilman Rahman.
Thank you. Sorry. Bless you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And good afternoon to everyone. There was a question that came up concerning Carnival subsidies. And the question is, Carnival subsidies have increased to address the rising costs. What costs? The rising costs relate to the high cost of bringing in goods to the island. The sound system is one of the factors. For next year, the Culture Department would like to incorporate more cultural elements to the festival in which more funds are needed. For Saba Day and Carnival, there will be a fixed contract with the sound system provider. This is a better way forward, and it reduces the cost to have a fixed contract. Also, the contractor is fully responsible for ensuring all the equipment is in good order, operational, and readily available. The equipment that was purchased by OLS in the past, only a few pieces are remaining, unfortunately. And it's not known what happened to the complete system. If I may say, a few weeks ago, it was reported by a civil servant that the room that stored the equipment, the lock was cut off of it. So that further goes to say that it was probably burglarized, and a report was made to the police, who are busy investigating. They would like to know, for example, what brand of the equipment was, so that they can further carry out the investigation. You asked a question about Saba Day's budget. The Saba Day budget falls within the Community Development and Culture Department since 2023 and have been managed by the colleagues of that department. The funds are used to cover the cost of the official day ceremony, including snacks and beverages, sound system, the entertainment for the entire weekend, and other miscellaneous costs involved with the planning of Saba Day. This includes a prize given to the booth that's most culturally creative. The other question you had was in regards to Project Bureau. Project Bureau is an external organization that is managed by the director, Mr. Carl Boncampo. The organization is subsidized by public entity Saba, and the account holder is the Department of Community Development and Culture. And in regards to the other question of the Project Bureau, because there were two questions separately. The Project Bureau was established as part of the SKA for the processing of participants in the program. Since Saba Reach Foundation has taken more responsibility over the SKA project and also changed the way the program is executed, there was no longer a need for the Project Bureau. Thus, the scope and function of the Project Bureau changed to focus more on small organizations in the community to support them, with seeking alternative funding from culture funds, for example, and writing grant proposals. The other question you had was in regard to event management, right? Event management refers to the organization and coordination of various public and community events, such as setup of meetings for team buildings, workshops, trainings for public entity employees, Saba Day festivities, street fairs, public health and community development events, games or activities hosted by the spot, child-focused daycares, after-school programs in schools. Facility management is often expected to assist with the setup of these events, ensuring that the necessary infrastructure and logistics are in place. The question you had that follows this was how many staff are available for this. Currently, there are no dedicated staff specifically assigned to event management under facility management. Instead, depending on the size and the scope of the event, we utilize existing staff available to assist with the necessary tasks. And a follow-up question to the same question was should event management be a government status? Yes. Event management should be a government responsibility. Public events like Carnival, Saba Day, and community fairs play a vital role in fostering community spirit, promoting local culture, and supporting public health and development initiatives. As such, it makes sense for the government to take the lead in organizing and managing these events to assure they align with broader public interests and community goals. By managing these events directly, the government can ensure proper oversight, maintain high standards, and create inclusive experiences that benefit all citizens. Additionally, it reinforces the government's role in supporting and enriching the social and cultural fabric of the community. However, for events that require specialized expertise, it is essential to bring in professionals who have the knowledge and experience to handle the specific needs of the event. Your next question was, what is the status of the Community Development Policy Plan? The status of the Community Development Policy Plan has been drafted with input from all relevant stakeholders locally. The draft policy plan was reviewed by me this week and also by the Deputy Island Secretary. Once it's completed and feedback received, it will be incorporated and then shared with the ministries of VVS, OCWA, BZK, and SLWA for further review and input. After this, the policy will be presented to the stakeholders and councils for final review. The Community Development Policy Plan outlines priorities for the department for the upcoming 5 years. The other question you had was Employment Opportunity Program. The participants of the Employment Opportunity Program are seen ready for the labor market when they are able to fully function in the regular job, adhering to the workplace rules and regulations. The program does have some training opportunities. These are planned and organized with their job coaches via the Saba Reach Foundation. Saba Reach Foundation actively looks at job vacancies and tries to connect workers who have potential to work in those positions. The next question was, can you explain what a community job center should look like? The community job center is at Saba Reach Foundation. Community members can visit the location and request assistance for applying for jobs. The job coaches can assist them with making a CV, job application letter, as well as preparation for interviews. Saba Reach Foundation is also willing to assist with connecting persons to the labor market. Public health. In what way is mental health prioritized? Public health and sports department mainly prioritize on promoting awareness for mental health in cooperation with its partners involved, such as Mental Health Caribbean, Saba Cares, Community Development and Culture, the local schools, etc. Recently, the mental health and safety research was co-published. The plan is to come together with the stakeholders involved and look at the learning points from the research and plan how to best address them. The next question was public hygiene and vector control. And this talks about ensuring food safety and exactly how it is executed. Food safety is ensured on Saba by the Department of Hygiene by the following measures. The colleagues in hygiene conduct inspections in bars and restaurants to ensure that hygiene is up to par and employees are following food safety standards. Inspections are also conducted in grocery stores to ensure that expired items are removed from the shelves. These inspections are sometimes done in conjunction with public safety, the fire department, and the police department. In the event that a business is in violation, they receive a verbal warning or a written warning depending on the violation. Once inspections have been conducted, or in the event that the department receives a complaint about the business, the Department of Hygiene meets with the Department of Public Health and Public Safety to discuss the findings and suggested advice to follow. The Department of Hygiene organizes a food safety training 2 times a year. People working in bars and restaurants are now required to attend the training in order to receive their food handler card. This card is needed to work in bars, restaurants, and Boots for Carnival and Saba Day. The Department of Vector Control ensures the control of vector-borne diseases by doing inspections around homes and businesses on the island for mosquito and rat breeding places. Mosquito products and rat bait is offered to the public free of charge. In the event that people on the island continue to have standing water on their property that create breeding places for mosquitoes, they receive a verbal and or a written warning to eliminate the breeding spots. Vector Control has also been working along with public health in mosquito campaigning and communication to the public via Facebook. The staff does have the authority and support to execute these tasks. The proper procedures are in place to enforce any discrepancies that may arise. And the other question you had was, why isn't education a standalone department, or education and culture, which has another question. So the reason for the Department of Culture to fall within community development is as follows. Within community development, the focus is on the social domain, youth, and education. These portfolios work closely with the same ministries in the European Netherlands that are also responsible for the topic of culture. It would be of added value to continue contact with these ministries to also include the topic of culture in these discussions. Education was always a part of this department from when the department was established in 2018. Because it has a significant impact on the development of our community. At the time of establishing culture as a part of community development, there was a need of one department that could be contacted for all matters relating to culture, to ensure that the topic got the attention and the awareness it deserves.
Thank you, Commissioner Heiliger. Before you have any follow-up questions, I think Councilmember.
One more. I will reach out to the Saba Summer Festival Committee and ask for the financial statements for the past 2 years. Sorry, that was one question you were asking.
Thank you. Before your follow-up questions, Ms. Matthew, is it okay if we adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes for a bathroom break? Okay, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes. Alright, we'll now resume the meeting, and now we will resume with follow-up questions to Commissioner Heliger by adding Council Member Matthew. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know where to start. Okay, I'll start with the carnival subsidies, just to clarify. So the rising cost is because bringing in goods. You mentioned about bringing in goods, but that's just the sound system, right? Just the sound system. And then with the, just a follow-up for the question about education and culture. Just your opinion. Know that because it has been this way since inception, but now things have changed. Now we have a lot more things on our plate. Don't you think it would be wise to separate up the department from community development? I mean, either way, all government departments have to work together. So at some point, everybody would have to find each other to get things going. So just as a follow-up question for that. And on the topic of the hygiene, the public hygiene, and you said that the employees at the hygiene department and vector control, they all usually check with the restaurants and they check in the grocery stores, and I know that for sure happens. I don't know about the warnings, but I take your word for it. But what about the when the food comes in on the boat? If something isn't like at the right temperature or whatever, do they have the authority for them to send it back or to raise concerns somehow about it? What was the procedure then? And community job center, so just to clarify, you said that this is already operational. So at Saba, you could already go and get help with a CV and yeah, that's what I'm saying. Help with a CV, yeah. I think that is it for me.
Okay. Commissioner Heliger, you can now respond to that Council.
With a rising cost in relation to the sound, if it was because of the sound system, the sound system is a part of it, yes, and it's actually the greater part of the subsidy that's given to the foundation. You asked if, my opinion, could you ask in my opinion, right? If there is a need to separate the culture department, if there's a need to separate culture from the Department of Community and Development.
Education and culture.
Education and culture. If there is a need to do it. And like I stated, from the time of inception in 2018 when that department was developed, education was there. But yeah, down the road in the future, I do see it as it can be separated from the Department of Community Development and have it as culture and education. But then what also comes into play is space, availability of space. Public entity don't have much availability of any space whatsoever. I think recently we rented space from like Saba Rose and RCN, if I'm not mistaken. So availability of space and would be one of the things that we have to think about, where we can actually locate it. And the other question was about vector control, right? When goods are being brought to the island. Yes, I feel that there should be someone at the port to check, for example, that the frozen goods are not left unattended in the hot sun. it should be inspected. That also goes for certain items such as bottled water, for example. The bottled water shouldn't be exposed to the sun for quite a long period of time. So it's something that, yes, that you can look into.
Well, something that they don't do right now.
At the moment, no.
I think it's done, but it's done ad hoc.
That concludes the questions, the
It
answers.
was
sorry.
2 questions.
Right?
Okay, Island Councilmember Charles, do you have any follow-up questions pertaining to the responses given by Commissioner Hilger?
I just because you mentioned the separation of the education and as you mentioned maybe something at some point that you would consider. You mentioned space being a consideration. Just because if you're saying maybe something down the road, I'm just curious, or when does that process begin? If it's something only about space, or is it something that can already, you can already start shaping, if you think that that's something.
Well, to be honest with you, it did cross my mind I think on Friday, when I had a portfolio meeting this Friday about looking to the process of having it done. So I'm going to look further into it, and like I said, we can start shaping it already, but it does happen.
Okay, I just have one follow-up question. You mentioned about the rooms at the Princess Children and the sports field being burglarized. And I was just wondering, since this is a multi-purpose facility that people of all ages and walks of life use, is there any plans to maybe install cameras at the facility?
I think, definitely yes. We should, because like I said, the room that stored the equipment for whatever equipment was left that belonged to the government, for example, the lock was cut off. No one knows who did it. And if that's going to be something that's going to be happening in the future, I think we need to start having some sort of surveillance cameras. I mean, there is a groundskeeper that works there, but that's only during the day. Anything can happen during the night, because the gates are not always locked. Seeing that it's also a sporting facility where people go to sports and use it at night, day or night. But having cameras inside and outside is a must.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hilger. Any more follow-up questions, or can we proceed? All right, thank you, Commissioner Hilger. And now move on to Governor Johnson. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and good afternoon to all present here today. So the questions that pertain to my portfolio, I'll begin with the ones about the organizational development. You stated that it's mentioned up to 20 times, and can you have a summary of it, if it's in the structural budget or a solid plan execution? So early last year, a 7-track plan was drawn up with a number of proposed developments for the organization. With this plan, a request was made to BZCAB to redirect already available but unspent special grants from the public entity to these new goals. The 7-track plan was shared with the Island Council earlier this year. A separate written update will be provided on this, and further questions can be asked during a designated information market with the Island Council. The registrar, together with the Island Secretary, will schedule this to ensure. You asked about the reassessing of staff to align with the organizational needs, and You ask what methods are used to gauge the organizational needs regarding staff and positions. So step by step, each team is assessed to see if competencies and skills are a good fit for the work that needs to be done. This is not always the case. This is also why a learning and development plan has been drawn up with the needs from the departments for hard and soft skills for employees. And later on. And you asked about certain roles have undergone adjustments, and if it's is this based on the CLA or the function book or board, and what is the status of the project of the function house. So currently HR 21 is being implemented for the entire organization. This is a function house that most municipalities in the Netherlands use and should provide a more objective way to divide functions with the corresponding scales. We are now transferring all the employees to the new HR 21 function. The fact is that no one will be worse off in scaling, so no one will go down in scaling. However, employees can ask HRM to look at their tasks and responsibilities again and whether the function is still suitable. You wanted to know if the Executive Council will ensure that the integrity initiative and the egg voting clock will continue with the change of the HRM department. The course for integrity and egg voting clock set by the former head of the HRM will be continued. In addition, we will also look at how we can strengthen our purchasing and tendering policy, which also Commissioner Zegas alluded to. Now we have the questions about ICT and the CIO. You stated about several previously budgeted positions have been transferred to the CIO office. What were these positions? Doesn't ICT mean staff? No positions have been transferred to the CIO office. The funding the CIO office acquired, which I had explained about different projects that we've written, has been used though to cover some of the structural costs for the IT department. So that's what the CIO deals with. In most definitions, you ask of a CIO and a description in the basic proposal. The CIO is the head of the ICT department. Why? When the CIO and the CISO fall under the ICT department. But within the public entity, there are no definitions of a CIO as head of the ICT department, nor has this been stated in any proposal. There is also no CISO. The head of the IT department acts as the role of the CTO, these abbreviations. Chief Technological Officer. There's close collaboration between the teams, the IT and the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, establishing a future-proof and secure government. So that's the main objective, where services toward the citizens and businesses can thrive. The CIO is an addition to the operational IT department. So the IT is mostly the operation, providing a long-term policy framework and an organizational-wide view on the information management, cybersecurity, and the information security and privacy. You asked about what was the idea behind making ICT and CIO offices separate. And since these are two separate offices or departments, vacancies should not come from the ICT. No vacancies or current employees are taken from any departments. Both teams work horizontally close together, managing the long, often legal policy lines and operational impacts on the organizations to try to get these things done. Moving on. for me, page 62, the ones regarding the training and development programs and the focus on hard and soft skills. How is it structured? Is it an ongoing process? Is it for all employees? What if an employee refuses training? The learning and development plan for the public entity and the program for employee well-being is happening and it has happened in the months of September, October, and November of this year. Also in January 2025, the employee well-being program, there will be an aggression management workshop on how employees should work with people who come into our workplace with these types of behavior. All employees can sign up and be part of the trainings. The department heads are also taking part in these trainings. So we are, with regard to the hard and soft skills, we work with the department heads in setting up the hard and soft skill trainings. We had interviews with the department heads in January of this year, and from there we collected all the data on the trainings they would like to do. There are over 119 different wants that departments would like for themselves and their teams to develop in. This will start in Q1 of 2025. We can explain further how this works. The organizational development plan is also part of the Saba package. If an employee refuses the training, it depends on the situation. For voluntary training, there are no consequences. And at the end of all workshops, employees fill in a survey about the workshops they attended. The trainer also asks the employees if they would like to see something different. We use this information and also share it with the next trainers for their framework. This is how we know if there is positive feedback or not. So those are my answers.
Thank you, Governor. Madam Councilmember Matthew, do you have any follow-up questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, one question you missed is if you can tell me about the employee well-being program and the positive results as viewed. So, the results so far of that program. But also, it's interesting that you said that the trainings are voluntary, because then my question then would be then, okay, if we try to professionalize the organization, we want to be more effective, we want to be more efficient, and there are certain things that everybody should be able to do, what happens is if in my role, I can't do it, I refuse to do the training, then what? So that's actually the question. For the ICT and the CAO. So yeah, there are no definitions within the organization about CIO, but the CIO is responsible for all ICT strategies, etc. So technically that makes the CIO the Chief Information Officer, the head of any ICT department. And in the basic proposal, when the CIO was proposed, because I went back in, I think, April, to see what the proposal was saying, because in the ministries, the CIOs have a different function. It's kind of like a information manager. So I just wanted to make sure to see if the definition online was the same or if it corresponded with the ministries. It did not. So that's why I'm wondering then why wasn't those two things just merged together? And you mentioned that the CISO, it doesn't exist, but I think there was a vacancy for a CISO a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know. But in general, of course, these two offices work together, but then I wonder why not just make it just one office? And Hazan, you mentioned that no positions were transferred to the CIO office, but under ICT, in the budget, I can't remember what page it is right now, it states that several positions were budgeted for ICT and they were transferred to CIO office. For the and with the organizational plan, this will be communicated in writing, and we will also get information matrix for this, right?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, if the training and development program is based on the government program, the Saba package, the organizational survey of audit, I'm not sure, I think the answer to that is in the same package. Training and development. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Saba package.
Yeah, conclude. Okay, Governor, you can now respond to the questions posed by Item Councilmember Matthew.
Just give me a moment about the employee wellness program. Okay, and the questions regarding, yeah, you asked about, if it's voluntary, and if an employee refuses, that was if we asked what happens if an employee refuses training. So, and shouldn't we make these things mandatory? But that is a very good point, because we invest in these civil servants, we invest in their training, their development. That is something that's part of the program, so that is something that we have to take seriously, because it goes both ways. The investments we have made cost money as well. To bring the trainers here to the island costs money. So these are things that they need to be understood in their labor conditions as well. With regard to the CIO and why weren't these merged and such, that is something which we discussed within the Executive Council, but the choice was made that the CIO would do the assistance with the searching for the funds in order to make the ICT department a more professional organization. So that is being worked on, but it is something that continues to have more attention, and why, and will be further explored in the future. So those are my answers to those things. Wellness. What specifically about the wellness?
In the budget,
Yeah.
it talks about the employee well-being program and about the positive results that it has yielded. So I'm just wondering what kind of results.
But these are the trainings that are now ongoing, so that is something that we can get more into when we have the information market. Okay. Yeah, like I said, that all employees do fill out a survey, so they do, provide that feedback, and that feedback is used to further develop the programs. So that's where they're.
Thank you, Governor. Do you have any follow-up questions? Councilmember Matthew? No? Councilmember Charles, do you have any follow-up questions?
I'll reiterate the follow-up. I had one follow-up question in regards to the training for employees, and it was more about the onboarding process. I asked it at the wrong time, so I just wanted to follow with that. And my question with that was about, how do we manage expectations at the beginning for both the employer and the employee, but also how to create an awareness of the soft skills necessary, how people are going to engage in their jobs, and how to engage and provide the services that are necessary for the particular department that they're working in. And the question is whether that happens sufficiently at this moment, and whether or not there's a program or idea to establish a program in the future to do that. Because I think the ongoing employee wellness program, that's one thing, but I think that's whether you've just started or whether you're part of the organization for a number of years. I think it's important to have ongoing development and trainings. Just one thing. And then, because you mentioned about function halls, and this HR 21, you specifically mentioned that it's more objective in comparison to the previous system, previous evaluation system or scaling system. And I'm just curious, how is it more objective than the previous system? Because we all had issues with the previous system. But another concern is what I see is growth, and how do we stimulate the growth of the employee within the scales. So for instance, today, someone maybe starts in scale 7, and how do we facilitate their movement from maybe scale 7 to scale 8 to scale 9? Because I know that people who've been in the organization forever, and they started maybe scale 3, and they still remain scale 3 throughout the entire time working for the public entity, which has implications, of course, financially. But then if you look at, we talk about people owning homes, we talk about people owning, taking care of themselves, taking care of their families. If you start in that position, and you remain there throughout your time in the organization, there's going to be little opportunity for you to eventually own any of those things and take care of your family adequately. And how do we look at the long-term growth of those persons? So I'm curious how that is being looked at in the function house. And this is not, it's not unique to Saba. It's something that happens in other organizations. But I also feel that at times we use the scales, and maybe because it's the only objective measure, but we use the scales in order to limit, and they can be used to limit people's development. Because we just say, it's all, of course, people that are higher paid and with higher education telling people with lower educations and lower skills that your experience never will equate to money, so then we can maintain your disposition. And how do we resolve those issues in regards to the scaling system? You also mentioned about having a purchasing officer. And I'm sorry, you also mentioned looking at purchasing in the organization and trying to streamline it. And I was curious whether or not the organization ever looked at hiring a purchasing officer to make the purchase of goods and services more efficient and more cost effective.
Thank you, Councilmember Charles. Governor Yacob.
Thank you. Yeah, regarding the onboarding, you had mentioned that when Commissioner Zegas was given answers. So that is something also that can be made a part of the process when we hire new employees, because every employee has to take the oath of office, but that's just something general. But within HRM also they have to grow in that and share and bring on new employees and make them learn about this organization and what makes this organization unique from others. So that is something that could be further developed and worked upon within the HRM. And also, like you said, to manage expectations, what they can expect here. With regard to HR 21 and the former the former function house, which was never adopted, and the former consultant, which we use. The reason why the choice was made for HR 21 is, like I said earlier, is because a lot of municipalities in the Netherlands use it, and when you put the information in the algorithm, it gives you a better idea of what a scale should be. But nonetheless, there are things here that are very different than in the European part of the Netherlands. So that's why also it's important that the employees with the department heads give the necessary information and input in the program, that they can take that into account as well, because they do have certain things for the islands in the European part of the Netherlands are way different than here. The other part which you've mentioned, not only today but in previous island council meetings with regard to civil servants in certain scales and their growth from, let's say, 3 to 4 to 5 or whatever. That is something which, like you said, is not unique to Saba, but it is something that has to be explored and worked on in the development of those respective civil servants, because some are, have limitations, but nonetheless we need to try with learning and development to see if there are certain ways which they can grow in the organization, and over the years, also if it's physical limitations that they're not able to remain in one department, that they could go to a different department. So these are all things that have to be developed and continuously developed in the HRM and within the organization, because our organization has grown tremendously over the past few years. A lot has been done. There's still a lot to do. We have the books for the department heads and such, but nonetheless, this is something that remains dynamic and something that needs continuous upkeep and development.
Thank you, Governor.
Okay, go back to what I want to thank you for that explanation. I agree that a lot of work has been done over the last few years to create a better understanding of what the organization wants from the employees, but also what employees can expect when it comes to their position. But I do continue to hear signals, civil servants, for instance, they're not sure how they move to a scale. So for instance, I know in evaluations, I hope they're more commonplace than they were previously. But someone says, well, maybe I want to do something different, but they don't know, or they haven't been told how that process works. So I'm concerned about what the conversations that are being had when those persons have evaluations, or how they feel, or what they feel like is a discussion that they can have about their own individual development. Because if I think I started here, but 4 or 5 years later, I think, well, I want a new challenge. What does that conversation look like? Who do I have that conversation with? And I remember I told someone the other day, hey, why don't you just go and knock on the door of the HR department and have a conversation and say, this is my concern. But they don't feel that it's possible to do that. And so that makes me question, what are we doing to instill that idea that there are opportunities for development?
Well, like he said, it starts a conversation, so we have to, enable that conversation also for the employees with the departments, with the HRM and the island secretariat, that those things are possible. So those are things that need to be discussed. But like you rightly said, it starts a conversation with a question. There's no wrong question, and it starts here with an open discussion.
Thank you. Okay, so before moving on to the last agenda point, I also have just a couple of questions pertaining to the multi-annual budget. So first, I too would like to congratulate the finance department and the executive council and all those involved in delivering the multi-annual budget. I think I've said this many times, but your hard work does not go unnoticed, and I extend my gratitude to you all. So I have a few questions, and the first questions are related to the loan repayment and liquidity position. and this is mentioned more in the beginning of the document, where the advice from the CFT suggests that loan repayments should not be budgeted as cost items, as they technically do not affect liquidity directly. And I think given the importance of maintaining a positive financial balance, especially with the public entity's growing responsibility, I think it's crucial to clarify what specific measures are in place to ensure that the public entity maintains a positive financial balance in the future, and how will the budget account for these repayments and other financial obligations, considering if they are no longer budgeted directly. And then my second question is in relation to Saba Splash. In the budget, it is mentioned with a budget cut basically of almost $1 million for 2025. My concern is, how does water management, in this case Saba Splash, plan to maintain operations at the current level? What specific areas of Saba Splash will be most impacted by the absence of $1 million from the special grant that was included in 2024? And how will the organization manage potential gaps in funding if a special grant is not received in 2025? Additionally, what measures are being considered to ensure that the quality of water management services remains unaffected despite the reduced budget? And that concludes my questions.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Chairman.
Zegers, you have the floor.
With regards to the loan repayment and the liquidity position, in the past, loan repayments were budgeted as cost items. Now for a few years that has no longer been the case. However, based on advice from the CFT, we're not really allowed to do that. Despite the change, the public entity of Saba still closely monitors loan repayments through our liquidity analysis to ensure a complete financial picture. By doing so, we maintain oversight of our repayment obligations and ensure that they are properly managed. To maintain a positive financial balance, we have implemented careful budget planning, prudent financial management, and are building reserve funds. These measures provide a safeguard against future financial risks and ensure we can meet both ongoing financial obligations and long-term loan repayments, even though they are no longer directly reflected into the budget. As for the questions about Saba Splash, indeed that specific budget has been reduced in 2025 by about $1 million. However, that $1 million represents funding for investments and not necessarily funding for operations. So the $1 million that is being referred to was for investments that included increasing water capacity via an upgraded pumping system, upgrade to the RO water intake, acquiring additional storage capacity, purchasing of spare pumps to ensure redundancy, upgrades to the Saba Splash plant itself, and expanding the water line to the Black Rocks Harbor and Solar Park area. Although several of the above-mentioned investments are now complete, a large portion of this subsidy remains unused since the expansion of the water grid to the Black Rocks and Solar Park area has not begun yet. An extension request has been submitted to the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management to be able to utilize the funding in 2025, and all indications show that how this will be received positively because they understand the circumstances. Therefore, there will be no impact on daily operations or quality of water management, since this was a one-time subsidy for a specific purpose.
Thank you. I don't have any follow-up questions, but I don't know if any of my colleagues do. So then this brings us to agenda point 7, which is closing. So today we covered 7 points on the agenda, and at this time I would usually ask if we can conclude that the budget will be a hammer piece. However, Commissioner Zegers mentioned that a word change is needed in the document before the Island Council meeting on Thursday. So I therefore look to my colleagues to ask how you would like to proceed. Would you like to await this change, or can we conclude a hammer piece? That's fine? Okay, so then we can conclude that the multi-annual budget will be a hammer piece for the Island Council meeting on Thursday. So at this time, I would like to thank you all for joining the Central Committee meeting of today, October 22nd, 2024. Join us for the next meeting, which will be on Thursday, which is the Island Council meeting of Thursday, October 24th, 2024, starting at 2 p.m. So thank you again for joining us and have a pleasant day further. Meeting closed.